Mustache Tales.
Yeah!
It starts with a little story, so I'm going to tell this story. So I remember hearing about Doug Benson because I was living in New York City working for this film lawyer named John Sloss, and the movie Super High Me came out, and I was like, is that legal? Like, and at the time, of course, it wasn't legal. And I love how, you know, when I look you up on the internet, they call you a weed advocate. And I'm like, it's just a guy who smokes weed. Regardless, when I got to LA, yeah, I mean, like, I'm a weed advocate, right? So, you know, and so I'm in LA, and I it's a little fuzzy because I've done your various of your podcasts, maybe 10, 12, I don't know how many times, so many times. And I got invited to do Getting Doug with High. And, you know, it's funny because our movies, everybody thinks that we just turn on the camera and just riff, and that we're really loose. And that really wasn't the case. It was very organized, very rhythmic, very specific. But in my mind, I'm like, no problem. I'll just get high and talk to Doug and it'll be fine, no problem. And I remember we were live streaming it, and I took, you know, 2 bong hits, and I was spinning off fucking Saturn's 7th moon. And I was like, oh my God. And there were 3 cameras, and I've already signed the release, and I'm like, oh my God. And my brain is just not fucking functioning. And I'm having huge fits of laughter. And I'm like, this is not the controlled performance that I like to give. I would have memory lapses. I mean, I was just like, oh my God. And then at the end, luckily, he had a car for me, drove me home. And my wife was like, you were getting high on screen? And I'm like, yeah. And she goes, our kids need to get into high school. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I said, I'm not doing that again. And then I just looked up on the internet, and it turned out I did another one with you guys live at Largo. And also
in front of an audience.
In front of an audience, only a year later, at Largo, which is right next to the grade school that my kids were attending. Then I did that again. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I mean, and then I was like, you know, it's not a great idea to get high on screen. And so then I'm going to tell a real quick story. So about a week ago, I got invited to do it's a new pilot. It's like Drunk History, but it's called High Story or something. You get high and you tell this ghost story that they spring on you the night before. It's 4 pages long, and you're like, and I was, you know, the thing about it is the reputation of Broken Lizard is that we're like Cheech and Chong, and at one point we were Cheech and Chong, but you know, I'm not quite Cheech and Chong anymore. But so everyone's a little disappointed with the amount of weed I smoke. And I remember the one thing I do remember being on your show, Doug, was that people were texting you or whatever, like, when's this pussy going to smoke again? How come this pussy won't smoke more weed? And you were eventually like, I got to tell you, people are calling you a pussy for not smoking more weed. I'm like, all right, I'll smoke more weed. Anyway.
Well, I mean, I just assumed that during the show. I don't read what they're saying, but in the comments on YouTube, it does. I'll just kind of tease the guests with the fact that you know, or you're being called a pussy right now if any amount of time goes by without smoking, because in their minds the idea is, you know, if it's a show where you could smoke, you should just be doing it constantly. But, you know, I always have to explain to them that we want to have conversations and stuff and not just be sitting there coughing, you know, having coughing and laughing fits. But, yeah, they're vicious. They're very vicious about it. They're hardcore stoners, at least at that time when we were, you know, going out live on YouTube. Now it's a show on Patreon, so it's a much more chill vibe.
You still do it.
At least in the comments section, you know.
You still do Getting High with Doug?
Yeah, we still do it. We turned it into like a Zoom thing during the pandemic, and then now that we're free to go out, we like go out to different locations. and smoke, or like if I'm on the road, we'll just do it like from my hotel room. And it's really just in the years since I started podcasting in general, it's really wild how much things have changed.
But the marginal return of smoking, if you were doing a show where you drank a lot and people were pressuring you to drink, you could see maybe you get more animated, you get more boisterous, you go. But the returns on the more you smoke actually can make people shut down. I've watched multiple episodes of Getting Doug with High, and you see the point of no return from certain
sometimes. That's why we made, there's like the Jack Black rule. After he did the show, we always made sure there was more than one guest, because then there's a better chance that at least somebody would be able to handle it. Because
you could
he
tap
came
out
on after, he did that thing that a lot of people are doing. Snoop Dogg announced just recently that he is done with smoking. But the way he phrased it makes me think, oh, he's going to do edibles or vapes or some other, he's just not going to smoke blunts anymore or whatever. But and he really ended it. It looked like a death thing because it was a black and white photo, and he's going like this, and he ended it with respect, like privacy at this time, because he knows that like the deluge of him being called a pussy for quitting is going to be insane. Like that's why he had to make an official announcement, I think, because just saying I'm good to somebody when they try to pass him something isn't going to fly. It's fucking Snoop,
No, I think that was the ultimate sign of how crazy the world's gotten. When I heard that news, I was like, holy shit. He's announced. He did it very somber. He did it very somberly too.
He's announced it in the past before. He's, of course, was Snoop Lion for a time. So, like, he can change his mind. It's like all these final tours that these bands go on where they say it's their, Kiss is on their 17th final tour as we speak, I think.
I've seen Kiss 6 times.
It's crazy. It's never not a good show.
No, it's incredible.
I don't know why they don't I don't know why they're not getting, like, holograms or something, because a lot of the fun of their shows is just the how much pyro there is.
Yeah.
And you could just do that about, put some robots or some holograms on stage. You don't have to be there. Did you hear ABBA's doing shows where they're not there? They're like not at, you go to a facility to watch ABBA and it's all, them just hologramming in from, I don't even know if they are performing live from wherever they are. I think it's even just recorded.
I mean,
they figured that out.
People are paying to see it.
Wow. My favorite part about the Kiss show is when Paul Stanley pretends to drink an entire bottle of cold gin, and the crowd goes absolutely bananas. Like, he's like, yeah, he goes, we're not drinking vodka. We're not drinking whiskey. And what we drink? Cold gin. And then he takes a whole bottle and just downs the entire thing of water. And you're like, yeah!
Of water. He's a showman. I think this Snoop move is genius because it's like when a prize fighter retires, their next fight when they get to announce a comeback is a huge deal. So he could come back out of retirement 10, 12 times.
Everybody's got their cynical take on why he's doing it. Like some think that he's just drawing attention to himself because he's got a project or a weed, his own weed line or clothing or something else is about to drop that he just wanted to get everybody, wanted to circle the wagons,
I have another perspective on it. I because having made Beer Fest, the amount of people who walk up to me at bars, first of all, they bring me shots of whiskey because that's what they fucking drink. I have a very calibrated fucking set of drinks. I drink like 6 vodka sodas. I'll go up to 8 or 9. I'll go down to 4. That's fine. But it's just organized. And they're singles. Unless it's a hot bartender, they're singles. And
well, you like that citron stuff. What was that? The Mandarin Stoli. Sure. Like, it's very specific.
Sure, very specific. And then some guy brings up 2 shots of whiskey, and I'm like, well, there's the whole fucking equilibrium that's thrown up. And then they keep coming. So I have to do this thing in my stand-up act where I'm like, no more fucking whiskey. That's enough. That's enough. And it worked. But still, people come up with 2 pints of beer they want to chug against me, and everyone's getting faster. And, it's fucking hard. And so this is what has caused me to pause when we've been talking about making the sequel to Beer Fest, making Weed Fest for years. And Kevin Heffern and I are like, hot. You want these fucking guys coming up to you with weed? I mean, we get it already where people pull up and like, I was outside a restaurant in Baton Rouge making Dukes of Hazzard, and a car screeched up, and they're like, "Get in, we're smoking weed." And I'm like, "All right." So I get in the car, and I'm like, sitting there smoking. I'm like, looking at these people. I'm like, "How old are you?" And he goes, 16, 17, 8. And I'm like, "Get me out of the fucking car." I mean, I read it, and I'm sure Snoop has it like times 1 million, right? Where everyone wants to knock Snoop out. And I'm sure he's just like, that's enough.
He's got people around him at all times, though, so you can't really run up to him and you'd be like, "Here, smoke this." But it's still got to be a lot. I mean, it's calmed down a lot for me because I'm just, I'm less, visible. I don't have like any TV or movie things going on really, and then also the legalization happening everywhere. There's less excitement around the idea of getting me high or getting high with me.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask. When you started that in like 2000, it was still illegal and you were doing it on camera. How did you get guests? Because it was like a big jump to get someone to come on the show and smoke weed and have it be filmed.
Well, I did the Super High Me came out like in 2007. We did it in 2006. And then, so that sort of like was a blast of, oh, this guy just went around the country smoking weed for this documentary, and nothing.
He owns this. He owns this space. Well, Super High Me was in the wake of Super Size Me, right? Didn't it?
Yeah. It was. It intended to be. My idea was to do a parody of Super Size Me and just switch it. Set a McDonald's to make it. Weed all day long every day, but then, because at the time we were shooting it, there was still like even medical marijuana facilities were being raided all the time. And so there's footage of that in the movie. And it just sort of captured a moment of when it really was about to start becoming legal, but was still being treated like it was, crack or, like they say in the movie at one point, they went out and filmed a pot store being raided late at night, and a protester outside yelled at the cops, "Go bust a meth lab, you pussies!" And pretty amazing thing to yell at a bunch of cops, carrying boxes of weed out of a building, but.
But after you did Super High Me, I remember at the time, because people had not consumed it that much publicly, and you had something like you had a higher sperm count at the end of the experiment after 30 days. Like you had health benefits that kind of came to light.
The whole cast and crew really took advantage of the situation during the 30 days where I was smoking continuously, and they would get high themselves quite a bit. And, so I still contend to this day that it was just getting your sperm tested or whatever is like you should do it at the place. Like for some reason it was decided I'd jerk off at home, and then
some guy just counts it on the floor.
A guy that works in the movie would take it in a bag to the place to get it analyzed. And I just feel like that feels like something went wrong. So of course, why change the results? Because it's hilarious that my sperm count went up, because that's, that's conventional wisdom is that it goes down. And we were just trying to show that there probably isn't any change at all. Who knows what it was dumb, So we tested a couple of times, and I think the second time was while I was getting high all the time, because the first part of the movie is 30 days of me just quitting cold turkey. Like I don't smoke for 30 days. And that was another thing where people were just always asking me, like, how did you get through those 30 days? And I go, well, it was like my whole life up to the point where I started smoking weed. Like it wasn't that bad. And as much as you want it, it's like, I always compare it to like cake. I mean, I want lots and lots of cake, but I can also not eat lots and lots of cake. You know, you can still, as much as I love marijuana and cake, I can set both of them aside, especially to make a documentary to prove that I could set it aside, you know? So even in the documentary, sometimes I'd say to camera, like, oh, I'm miserable or whatever, just to play up that aspect of it. But, you know, it's not that hard to quit. It's just a joy to continue.
Well, this is...
so getting back to your Getting Dug with High question. So they... So that was a few years after Super High Me. So people, you know, I had enough of a reputation and enough friends that appeared in Super High Me, comedians and stuff, that getting guests was doable. And there were some really good, notable people who really stepped up. But then a lot of people who are friends of mine or just strangers, but that are very much known for their advocacy of marijuana, still didn't want to take that chance of you know, being live on camera doing it, because it's just too easy to you know, embarrass yourself.
Well, they used to be like a death sentence for presidential candidates when they'd ask, have you ever used drugs? And, you know, the famous, I never inhaled. Like, it was like, it would make you a horrible person for your whole life.
I put it in my mouth and I licked it real good, but then that was the end of the engagement. I've never tried to do a Bill Clinton before.
That's pretty good.
Nailed it. Pretty good.
So yeah, it's you know, so things have changed over the years, but there's still, to this day, I still argue that it's strangely harder to get somebody to get high on camera than to do, like, say, Drunk History. And also, ever since Drunk History, that show started, I've been constantly bombarded with, you should do High History. You should do Get High and Tell Stories. And it's like, I'm high all day, every day. Every story I tell, I'm telling high. And guess what? I'm semi-articulate. You know, it doesn't mess with you. You know, you might go, or, you know, you might forget what you're talking about at some point. But that doesn't make an entertaining show. I hope this thing that you're on, Jay, I hope it's better than it sounds, because it just feels like the premise is already weak, because you know, unless you get somebody who really gets wrecked by marijuana, then I guess that would be funny, but then that would also just be it would be like a public service announcement that you shouldn't do weed, because then you can't tell a ghost story. That you learned
I went over to Gower Studios. They sent a car, and I'm over there, and I'm getting in a trailer. There's a dude in the trailer who's has been assigned to get high with. By the way, I was showing Hayes this Doug Benson pin that sits next to my toothbrush every day. Every day I see you.
Oh, wow.
Every day I see you.
What an honor.
Yeah, and I get in this trailer, and this dude's there who's like, my job is to get high with you. I'm like, okay. And he goes, they told me to bring a lot, because, and so I brought this 1 pound joint, because you're like a famous stoner. And I'm like, I'm just going to have 2 bong hits. And he was so disappointed. Like, he was just like, oh, man, I mean, you know, I thought you were going to be, I was told to really be ready for you. And I'm like, I've got to go be on camera. And then when I get on camera, it was, I mean, look, I think it was funny, but then again, I was in and out of consciousness almost. It was so strong. I was losing my fucking train of thought. I was laughing fits. And then I would try to tell a story. Who knows? It's all in how they edit it.
They'll chop that up. They'll chop that up and make it even weirder than it was in the moment. You know, that'll be pretty easy to do, but it's just like on a per show basis. Like, I guess it's fun to watch somebody that's just kind of so high they're a mess. But
I don't know.
No, people are signing up to watch the train wreck, and the drunk train wreck is entertaining and goes off the rails. The high train wreck, why I enjoy watching it, is it's so awkward. It's like people, like extroverts, go like into their skin. They just want to hide, and it's not as entertaining, but you're feeling how uncomfortable they are.
Yeah, it's like watching like a dog that looks like it's about to be hit. Like, it's just cowering. Like, what do I even, like, how do I because
I
you know
know.
you get so in your head, like does everybody know that I'm this high?
Right.
And
Right.
it's funny because I also have, Douglas Movies is a long running, essentially game show podcast. And so getting high with me, before the show happens quite a bit. And then people freak out and, start blaming being high on not being able to answer trivia questions. And it's more like, well, no, you just can't function at all while you're high, because I still know the same trivia when I'm high. I don't suddenly not
But
know.
I'm on that show. I've been on that show so many times, and my problem is I really just don't know movie trivia. And so when I get high,
Right.
I'm not any worse or any better. I'm just not good at movie trivia. But you keep having me back, I guess, so I appreciate it.
Oh, it's fun, and I've learned to make it. Anybody has a chance to win, because more of the questions just have a kind of a guessing element to them. And here's a funny one that happened, because I remember one time you came to do either Douglas Movies or Getting Doug with High, and then when you got there, you thought you were doing the other show.
Yes, that's right.
So that was also funny that confusion has happened a few times.
That's right.
You think you're going to go do some movie trivia, and then you end up getting high, or vice versa.
That's right.
Yeah. But one time, acclaimed filmmaker Ari Aster, who did, Midsommar and Hereditary, he was my guest on Doug Loves Movies in Austin, Texas. And we were sitting around in the green room before the show, and, one of my friends that gets me high all the time was there with a whole dab rig. And, so we were doing dabs back there. And he says to Ari, you want to do a dab? And Ari's like, sure, because he thought he was going on Getting Doug with High. And so he gets really high backstage, and then he comes out, and I start asking about his movies and trivia questions and stuff, and it did not go well for him. He even says at one point, I thought this was Getting Doug with High, and I was like, okay, yeah, I'd come do a live Getting High show in Texas. What do you think I am, crazy?
Can you tell tell me about your early plans to be an actor? And I know you're still an actor, but I mean, like, I watched that little bit. I mean, that incredibly lush part where you get to hit on Jennifer Aniston in Friends. Like, how did that happen? Like, what happened? Like, what was going on that you ended up getting to do that?
I just have done a lot of writing and a lot of, other sort of show busy kind of jobs since the day I hit Los Angeles. I grew up in San Diego, and when I graduated from high school, I just went to junior college in San Diego for a couple years, just to also during that time, just have several part-time jobs and raise enough money so that the goal was to just move to Los Angeles. And the plan was to, start by being an extra in movies, and, trying to get a line, trying to just get in the door to get into SAG. Then at the time, SAG and AFTRA were separate, just get into SAG, because, you're just not going to get auditions for movies if you're not in SAG, but you also can't get into SAG until you've spoken in a movie or TV show. So it's, it's that weird catch-22. And so I was just the extra that was there to get lines. And within my first year of doing extra work, I managed to get into SAG. Because I just, was very annoying about it. I just saw a clip recently of Brad Pitt talking about how when he started out as an extra, he was a waiter in a scene, and he's just supposed to pour some water into somebody's glass, and they have the dialogue, he's just the waiter. And the first take, he pours some water in the lady's glass, and he goes, "Can I get you anything else?" And the director was like, "If you do that again, you're fine. You're off my set." So he didn't do it again. But but that was sort of that was sort of my approach, So like, I just got lucky that I knew the rules well enough to know when they couldn't take advantage of the extras, which is part of what this whole recent strike was kind of fighting over. Is just how um, back when I was trying to get my SAG card, the basic rule was, if it appears that someone's speaking on camera, they get, they should get paid SAG. So I went and saw that movie. I did extra work in a movie called Secret Admirer, and I went to see it. And at one point, I get like pulled out of a car. They gave me like a little extra money that night, a little bump for the action, but the actor pulls me out of the car, realizes that I'm not the guy he's looking for, and pushes me back in. And then when I saw the movie, and I don't say anything, and when the movie came out, they dubbed in, "Hi, Steve," like some nerdy kind of reaction to Steve doing that. And so, I was like, "Hello, SAG," because, they're not supposed to get away with that. And I guess they probably often do because nobody knows any better. So, and then also on Moonlighting, they had a scene where they just walla'd like a bunch of people talking while all of us in the scene were standing around. It wasn't us specifically talking. They didn't give us lines, but that was also enough for me to. So I got kind of like, I had two cases at once. So SAG was just like, "All right, you're in SAG."
That was what the whole central issue of the strike was. You summed it up. It was the catch-22 of getting into the union was you have to have, it was like first a Taft-Hartley job, and then your next job, you got your card. But they wanted to scan us so that those jobs wouldn't even be available. There would be no entry point anymore if that was allowed to happen, because you would be like a computer. Like if you stood in one show 10 years ago, and then they'd put you in this one, but you'd never get over that hump of getting the credits to get into the union. And I think that's what part of the big fight was.
Yeah, and then also the meager residuals I get for those first two jobs are still residuals. There's still a few pennies rolling in every few days, and that's like another thing that they just need to protect. Is this notion that, well, once we sell something to streaming, then we don't have to pay the actors anymore. We don't have to pay residuals because it's just on streaming, and there's been no set rate for residuals. And
then you don't make your minimum, so you can't get the insurance thing, because enough of those residuals, if you had that could get you insurance for the year. But then they took away the residual
forever. All the years I've been in SAG, I've had, I've got it made enough that year to get the insurance. So rarely, it's really, it's sad, because that is another thing they really should be working on.
That's true.
But anyway, so I did lots of extra work, and I got into SAG, and then, through my stand-up comedy, which, was not my intention when I moved to LA. I just wanted to be an actor, writer, maybe director, but probably not, because I was never quite. I'm now finally feeling like, I might want to direct something. But anyway, I just, kept plugging away. With my stand-up, you get, that was a way to get, a theatrical agent and management and all that, because, you're already, becoming, you're already making money as a stand-up. So if they get a piece of that, they can help you get acting roles. And the longest day job I had during my whole time being in LA was, for a while, I had a really cushy job writing promos for the WB network when it existed. And I had like an office there, but they still let me do stand-up. I still got to travel, and I could still do auditions and act and stuff. But I had like a pretty serious deadline going on some promos. And my agent calls and goes, "Hey, can you go across the street and audition for a part on Friends?" And I was like, it's one of those gag moments where, like, I hung up the phone and I was already standing over at the other lot, because I was working on one lot that's just a few blocks from the main lot. So I went over and I auditioned. It's like, it's a dumb little scene. I have like 2 lines, so you do the whole scene. And I did it, and the room laughed, and they said, "All right, stick around. because it was so last minute. They just brought in like 3 actors. They just chose 3 people to bring in. So I got a laugh. I felt pretty good about it. One of the other 2 actors was even a buddy of mine, and they both, did their lines, and they came back out and just sort of said to me, "Hey, you're the one that we're going to use. You got to be over on the soundstage in an hour." And so 1 hour after being told I was going to be on Friends, I'm standing there saying the lines to Jennifer Aniston.
That's incredible.
And I was a huge fan of that. I was a huge fan of this show at the time.
Yeah.
And my work, that show's crazy. I'm in one scene towards the end of the episode. So we did a blocking rehearsal that day, and then they said, "See you on tape day." And then, so that was like Wednesday. And then on Friday, I came back for the taping, and that show is just nuts how much time they spent taping it. I don't know if people really realized that when they're watching a 22-minute episode, that the audience was there for 4 hours.
Wow, yeah.
And they even would have a line outside when people would leave. They just load in new people. And like the warm-up act had to like constantly be like throwing T-shirts in the crowd and stuff just to keep them at that fevered pitch, because my scene was at the end of the episode, and they started my scene at like 11:30 p.m. on that Friday night of the taping that started at like 7 or 8. And anyway, my point is just that I just had to constantly check my phone because I never told my bosses that I was guest starring in Friends that week. So I just had to like make sure they weren't like looking for me or asking for, that they needed anything from me. And I think I told them like, it was a while later because I didn't want to blow it because, the same thing could have happened again with some other show or something. So as long as I got away with it once, I was like, I'm not going to confess it to these guys until after I'm not working for them anymore.
Yeah. But it was like when everyone first starts, they're living like a double life. You have one job and then you're trying to do another one at the same time.
Oh yeah, well that's the thing is I was just lucky to be like, my day job was, from my perspective, very exciting because like, that they had Buffy the Vampire Slayer on the WB, so I got to see all the episodes early and meet everybody in the show, and it was like if I had to have a day job, might as well be that. Plus, also I was just writing, dumb jokes for promos. And for a while, we came up with this campaign where like they'd show like all this activity happening on the Warner Brothers backlot. Like it would be all the interstitials in between the shows would be like you'd see Nikki Cox and Felicity or whoever just all running around, and they'd have this big loudspeaker like on MASH, and there'd be like these droll announcements about what was happening. And so I ended up getting to be the voice of those announcements. And so like I would write, and for everyone I would write, I'd also get paid very well to record it. Like those voiceover people get paid very well. So like the more I'd write for myself to say, the more I would get paid. It was the most ridiculous. It was this crazy scam of I'd be like, "Hey, we need the loudspeaker to say this here." They go, "Okay," and like you'd even get like double your money if you had to say tonight and Wednesday. Like if you had to do 2 different versions, one where you say tonight, one where you say Wednesday, you get paid twice. So I would always make sure I do every possible version that they could ever need. It was the weirdest. It was a wild time.
When you were doing the early stand-up stuff, because I remember the path used to be you'd want to do your stand-up and then have that become a sitcom on its own. Like your personality would become, you'd be in the clubs working, and then some writer would say, "Hey, let's develop this for you," and then it would be Kevin James or Jerry Seinfeld, or like that was what everyone was keying on doing.
Yeah, it was really a big push, and like a lot of people were trying to get into like the Montreal Comedy Festival because people would get spotted there for those kind of deals, and like, David Letterman produced the Ray Romano show, because he liked Ray Romano's stand-up so much. But so much of that came from comedians that had like, a story or an attitude. And, during my early stand-up, when I'd even have any kind of chance at being developed that sort of way, I didn't have any particular story to tell. Some white kid moves from San Diego to LA and tells jokes about random things. Like I didn't have anything to do that with, but I did have, lots of other opportunities along the way. Like I came really close to being in a James Burrows pilot, and that guy was like the pilot king or whatever, and but that the pilot I didn't get into didn't also become a show, so that always feels good when that happens. But but and then like in the case of podcasting, that sort of came along and has been a real a godsend if you want to be religious about it, because it's just something that I could still do during the pandemic, and I could still do during the strike. Like there's two things back to back that lasted a long time that, it shut a lot of people down completely. But, stand-up comedy and podcasting were both exempt. So I could, from those things, those things they weren't exempt from the pandemic, but you know what I mean? Like, we did lots of, Zoom shows and stuff. Like we still did stand-up. Like I did tons of like outdoor stand-up comedy, which I still is my favorite kind of comedy to do, because, I just love just doing a show outside.
Yeah, I like
those.
I like those outdoor shows because they were also connected to legal weed shows. They were legal weed outdoor shows.
A lot of times, yeah.
Which was, everyone was fucking high, and it was a great audience. And
there's a place called Jam in the Van on the west side that like they just give everybody. They can't, you can't. That's the loophole or the problem with trying to. Everyone's always like, why don't they open up weed clubs? Comedy clubs with weed or nightclubs with weed. And it's because you can't. Everywhere where it's becoming legal, it's still being baked into the rules that a place can't sell alcohol and have weed consumption happening there.
Yeah.
So, and alcohol you're still going to make. Even if you had a weed bar where you sold some weed, like it's just not going to do the kind of business that you get with a club that sells alcohol. So, that's where their money is. But in this case, Jam in the Van figured out that if they just have a quote unquote open bar where they just get a beer sponsor to just give them a bunch of free beer, then they just give people the beer, and then they can, everybody can smoke.
That's right. Comedy shows you make the money on the booze, and people show up with one joint and they're good for the whole night. There's nothing to sell.
Yeah.
Unless you're smoking
the
way you
so you got to get the money at the door or selling the weed or whatever. But they seem to have worked it out. I got to do a show recently where, and I wish this would happen more often. It was at a pet adoption facility. And a fancy one, like a upscale one over on the west side, and they told the audience that everybody could bring their dogs. So like most audience members had a dog sitting next to them. I just looking around at dogs, that are clearly don't know why everyone's gathered. Like why is this guy so important? But it's really fun because also if you make any sudden loud noises, they start barking.
They get jittery.
But that was neat. I wish there was more of that.
Did you sit there for a few minutes before that and write some dog jokes?
I came up with some stuff, just relatable stuff. Like I opened with where are my ball lickers at, that kind of thing. Yeah, I think I answered a question in there somewhere.
You did. I have some questions. I was an extra in the movie The Color of Money, and
nice.
And I'm on screen. I'm on screen at age 17, whatever, in Chicago. But I saw that you were an extra in three things that I want to know about: Blade Runner.
Okay.
Fast Times at Ridgemont High. And the Michael Jackson. You're a dancer. I mean, this is like a great window into the young actor's mindset, which is like, I'll do anything. I'll even put on an orange jumpsuit and dance behind Michael Jackson. Because I gotta believe, Doug, you're not a dancer, right? Are you a dancer?
No, not at all. Not at all. Barely fairly musical, even though I've been in a bunch of musicals. But the dancing has never been my thing. Francis Ford Coppola was hired to direct an epic short film in 3D starring Michael Jackson as Captain EO that would play exclusively at Disneyland parks.
And that was like a persona of Michael Jackson, right? It was like his alter ego or something.
Maybe he thought that much of it. I don't know. It's
a future thing. It was like
the whole thing's very vague. Yeah, it's in the future, and he's the captain, and he just wants to spread joy through music, but he still gets into some intense situations. But
see, there's the story there.
They went way over budget. They went way over budget on this ridiculous movie, and so to save money on the last long ass day of shooting over at Culver Studios, they decided to just replace the professional dancers with extras from an extra agency who are saying they can dance. That's all you had to do was say you could dance. Yes, I can dance. You're in.
Because they put the pro dancers up front, and then they keep it tight on. I just watched it today, and they, there are a couple shots.
Well, the pro dancers, you could tell when they're doing their thing, and then at the very end of the short, Michael Jackson, turns Angelica Houston into a princess, and then he begins to dance around and celebrate. And from that point forward, it's me and a bunch of other people who they even did a session with the choreographer the morning we got there. They even did a session with us to see if we could pull off something. And everyone was so bad that they just said, screw it. You can all go freestyle. Just be jubilant, just dance around jubilantly. So, especially when you watch it at Disneyland, you can see the whole big screen. I can point to which one I am. Because they do cut pretty quickly because they don't want to dwell on how terrible it is because nobody's dancing particularly well. I'm just jumping around in the silliest ways. It's so ridiculous. And, and then they shot it in a way where they, every time they cut to Michael Jackson, it's just him and his robot friends like leaving, like they're dancing away from us, so kind of. And Angelica's just kind of standing amongst us or whatever. But I just really took it as a license to just not only, dance badly, but also weirdly, just to try to stand out, but just the fact that it was Francis Ford Coppola, Michael Jackson, and it was going to be at Disneyland's was always my favorite thing growing up. So it was going to be at Disneyland. It was all very, very exciting, but also just, sad at the same time because it was such a long shoot day, a lot of just sitting around. And Michael Jackson had like his current, I don't want to say boyfriend, but current child that was his best friend, would sit on his lap in between takes. I don't know if he was telling him what he wanted for Christmas or what, because they'd whisper. One would whisper in one's ear and they'd laugh, and then the other one would whisper something and they'd laugh. It was trippy.
I got one of those calls one day. Wow. Someone I was working with was like, "Yeah, that's you got to see it firsthand. I'm surprised you didn't get subpoenaed, Doug, to testify against him." This guy called me one day.
It's all very innocent, but also just weird that he's like thinks he's a child. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's forgivable because of the mindset.
I don't know. That guy did so many things that were just like, what? Like, why is this happening?
Well, yeah.
It's just a level of richness and fame, and then now this Broadway musical that's touring the country, allegations. That's like as far as they get. Like somebody says it like that, allegations. And that the rest of the show is just like, wasn't he the most amazing, gifted, beautiful person.
Well, he's the most.
The only children. The only children in the show are the ones that play him when he's younger. They don't depict what I saw.
I mean, he was so powerful. And as I was watching this 16-minute video today, I was like, this guy is so powerful that they got Francis Ford Coppola and they're doing Star Wars level, like, you know, spaceships are flying and like laser beams. And I'm like, what the? I mean, it's incredible that ever even happened.
It's the 3D is really good. Like when you see it at the theater at Disneyland, it looks like things are like floating like right in front of you, like children like swipe at the things. And ever since that movie came out, I'm like, why have we never gotten that level of 3D in a movie theater where we buy tickets and put the glasses on? Like, wow, because it's just this one theater, the way it's designed can do, extra great 3D, and then you go to a theater and put glasses on, and it's all you get is like more depth.
I don't know.
You know what I mean? Nothing comes at you really. It's just got more,
Jackass.
Like even the Avatar movies, it doesn't come at you.
Jackass 3 in 3D was that. That I don't know if you remember that. Those shooting those slow motion dildos at you. I thought that was. I think that's the greatest 3D I've ever seen. But I haven't seen the Michael Jackson.
It's pretty good. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, pretty incredible.
So you just watched the whole Captain EO? You watched all of it on just on YouTube?
Yeah, on YouTube. I was like,
wow.
I said, oh, it's gonna be 16 minutes. Okay. Oh yeah, I'm good. Okay. Well, but it was. The funny thing about that guy is, say what you will about his pedophilia, and I'm fully against it. But man, the dude could dance, and his songs. He's the greatest dancing pedophile I've ever seen for sure. That's number one. But beyond that, like when a song plays and you're in that fucking waiting room and you go like this, you're like, God damn, he got me again. I mean, I'm fully against him and his what he did, but that dude could fucking spin a song.
No, it was well, the moral conflict is when you're at a kid's birthday party and Billie Jean comes on, and you just can't not dance. But there's another level to this where they shouldn't be playing the song.
Yep.
He's just his songs are too popular, and he's just the legend. I mean, because everything he did was so. He was in the tabloids constantly. Like, who do we have today? Like George Santos is like the closest I'd say to Michael Jackson level of just like, what is this guy doing? Like every time you hear about it, I was like, what? He did what? How is this? Why is everyone allowing this to continue? Like Michael Jackson owning an amusement park and saying, hey, send your kids here. And by the way, you can just leave them. You don't have to stay. You don't have to stay with them. What? Nobody's going, no. You gotta shut this down. It was even just shitty carnival rides. He didn't even build good new rides like Disneyland. He just brought in a bunch of shitty,
What do you guys think the percentage of people at the Las Vegas Sphere when they go to one of those shows that their mind is altered? They're either on psilocybin or marijuana. You're talking about those 3D theaters that Walt Disney had. I mean, that looks like a venue that everyone just must be out of their mind when they walk into.
My wife just went to U2 at the Sphere, and look, normally when I watch people taking, I was doing stand up in Vegas. Normally when I'm at a concert and I just went to Wilco, and this guy in front of me had his phone up the whole time, and I'm like, as much as I love Wilco, and I do, I'm looking at this guy going, you fucking loser, you fucking dumbass loser. Like, I just can't stand his phones at concert. I'm half of me is thinking about what a loser this guy is. So when my wife came back from the thing, she's like, you got to see my videos from the concert. I'm like, I don't want to see your goddamn videos. And then she showed me some videos. I'm like, God, this place is incredible. It was the first time in my life that the videos from my wife's showing, I'm like, it was just incredible what they were doing in this Sphere. Like with holograms and like just these light. I mean, it was just so wild. The Sphere is I mean, I haven't gone to it, but I'm going. And then I'm going to take videos and I'm going to make you guys watch.
I think it sounds like an amazing experience, and that, like, I was talking to somebody yesterday who was saying that the sound is much better than your typical arena because it's just so much more contained, in the sphere or whatever. But it just doesn't seem like you have to be as big as U2 to not be dwarfed by the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like you have to be able to be like, yeah, but these are our songs that you're tripping out to right now. Like that's such a big part of the experience. But like, it's like, why do they even necessarily have to be there? If you could see imagery of anything, why can't the imagery be? Why can't they pre-film their parts? And be bigger on the screen. And
or just do it like ABBA and just have the holograms do it.
But people want it all. They want to see you too.
Yeah.
Look at him down there.
Yeah.
And they want to have, because the sphere does seem really cool, but I just worry for, it's another area. Like, I guess SAG and AFTRA couldn't really fight for, hey, don't make the performers the smallest part of the experience.
Well, the videos,
like, you can't do stand up in the sphere. That'd be stupid.
Doug Benson in the sphere.
I can see that. Definitely.
I mean, everybody would get high for that for sure. But that's the thing that's been fun, even more fun for me about Vegas is, like, I don't personally feel like I can walk down the strip with like a joint in my hand, but you really can. Like, I don't like to be that blatant about it, but it's really things have really picked up there in that regard, and so yeah, everybody going to the sphere is on something.
Yeah, it's part of, that's where
we're
at.
Weed, like when you get to Vegas, when you're driving in from the airport, there's billboards immediately going, weed's right here, like an arrow pointing down, like you're 1 block from the airport and they're saying, hey, you can buy weed here.
Right. That's where we're at. You're either going to watch like Martin Scorsese's Killers of a Flower Moon on your iPhone. That's one thing. Or you go big and watch U2 in the sphere. There's nothing in between though.
I want to watch a movie on my phone while I'm at the sphere.
with Jay's wife filming you watch the movie.
Both mediums.
My wife. Hey, so we're at the 50-minute mark, so why don't we'll do this, we at the end of the episode we always vouch for something. I think I told you about this app I created called Vouch Vault because I got pissed off at Rotten Tomatoes, and it's basically a recommendation app from people I'll go first. I found this book, Michael Crichton, Prey. Actually, I did a stand-up special recently. My editor had this on his shelf, and he gave it to me. And I used to love Michael Crichton books because I always learned something. When I read Jurassic Park, you learn about DNA being in like the sap, like maple syrup sap being preserved forever. I read the book Congo, where you learn about like how much apes can speak languages. So this book Prey is about AI, and it's about these like nanoparticles that behave like they programmed to behave like bees, like in a swarm. And unfortunately, these nanoparticles are supposed to just sort of, they're supposed to form a camera. They were going to be like a camera over Russia or wherever, and it would take an image and then scatter. But these things started procreating, and then they started eating humans and were their prey. But anyway, it's another great book by Michael Crichton, who's dead, but I love it. I love Michael Crichton. So that's what I'm vouching for.
He's very tall. He was a very tall man.
Tall man, smoked a pack a day of cigarettes, was a doctor, wrote coma.
Right.
Like he was a genius. He was able to figure out how to write these like fast novels that are like with not really long chapters necessarily, but you get a bunch of information. A lot of it I don't even understand about this programming of nanoparticles, but it just kind of blows right by. It doesn't really matter. He's an impressive guy, and I love his book.
He, directed some movies.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, those didn't turn out so good.
Well,
we were talking. I know he wrote the pilot of ER, and then maybe the whole series in the first couple years, which is totally different than the sci-fi stuff that he did with Jurassic Park and Congo. And
It's still got lots of technical language. He's always good with that kind of stuff, you know. And then, of course, Jurassic Park is a classic, but like, you know, he also had like, you know, Tom Selleck in Runaway. He directed that one, and Gene Simmons plays the bad guy, and it's funny that it's they're little like spider robots. I think is the problem in that movie. But he is really like most of his things is sort of like medicine or technology run amok. You know,
Yeah,
it's like those things gone badly. So of course it makes for a good book and for a fun movie.
you know, the funny thing about when directors are not actors and they hire someone to be the lead actor, they're often trying to hire the actor who kind of looks a little bit like them or reminds them of themselves. So I bet he, you know, Tom Selleck was a tall guy. You know, I bet he was like, I'm kind of like Tom Selleck, and then he hired Tom Selleck to be the lead guy.
Like Richard Dreyfuss was Spielberg, right? Like,
yeah,
he was his avatar.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
Scorsese and De Niro. You know, then Scorsese went up to Leo.
John Ford and John Wayne.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
those.
I love it.
I'm
what you got, Hayes?
vouching for. So, you know, we love John Prine, the singer-songwriter. When Jay and I first started talking about putting this together a million years ago, this show where we just talk to each other, we wanted to have a John Prine intro song. John Prine is from Illinois, where we're both from. He died at the beginning of COVID, which was just like, I hadn't thought about him in a long time. And then when he died, he kind of came back into my thinking. And I have 2 young kids, and I started playing John Prine around the house all the time. And I want to tell them stuff and teach them stuff, and they don't listen because I'm a parent and they're kids. But when I play John Prine lyrics, they start singing them. And I'm like, okay, I did something right. So this book just came out. My friend Doug Benson sent it to me. It's called Prine on Prine. And it's a collection of all of his interviews that he did. It's not like an autobiography or a biography that someone wrote about his life. It's just a straight dictation of the interviews that he gave throughout his life. Like he's just shooting the shit with Chris Christopherson or Studs Terkel. There's all this kind of just dialogue. You see what one person said and what someone else did. So I just cracked it, and I'm going to go for Johnny Prine.
Love it.
Yeah.
It's easy to vouch for, even though you haven't read the whole thing, just because you know he's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's very few books that I've read all the way that I could vouch for. So
yeah, you're not going to see me holding up a book over here on my end. That's not Doug Love's novels. Is it my turn to vouch?
It's your turn, Doug.
All right, here goes my vouch. Brand new on Netflix is a anime series that's based on the books and the movie version of Scott Pilgrim versus the World. It's called Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, and I saw the first 3 episodes of it. And if you like the Scott Pilgrim movie or the Scott Pilgrim comics or just anime in general, hipsterism, if you will, then snarkiness, then check out, because it's much like the movie's one of my favorites of all time.
Is that Michael Cera in that movie?
Yeah. Yeah, your boy Michael Cera. You worked with him, right?
I worked with him when he was just a young kid on Arrested Development, and he was impressive in timing. Impressive. Just a magical actor.
He's always been very talented and funny, I think.
Yeah. So they made a whole animated show based on not just the movie, but they created the world, and it's a series.
Yeah, because the movie was like made when there was like 3 comic books, so the movie was sort of based on that. And then he kept making the creator of the comics, Brian Lee O'Malley. he kept making, more stories. But then now, the director Edgar Wright he's only executive producer. I shouldn't say only, it's a big thing that he's executive producer, because he got the entire cast of the movie to agree to be in this voices in the series. So all these actors a lot of them were pretty big even when Scott Pilgrim came out, but then they've now been made even bigger thanks to Marvel, like Chris Evans and Brie Larson and people like that are in it. And so you got the whole cast together, but the series is, you start watching it and it feels like the movie. It feels like an adaptation of the movie, but then certain lines are different characters say different things, and then suddenly it's almost just like, well, what if this story, could be a series that's able to split off in a bunch of different ways. So there's lots of people who are longtime fans of the movie and the books are going to have plot points and jokes and moments that they're not already familiar with. So it's a great show to start with if you haven't seen or heard of any of the Scott Pilgrim stuff before, or if you're already a fan.
You don't think I should go back and watch that movie? Because I haven't seen, even though I'm buddies like Sarah, I haven't seen the original Scott Pilgrim movie.
It's a super fun movie to just rewatch. So it could be fun for you to do it that way. But then when you start watching the series, you'll go, oh yeah, I see that it's kind of like the movie, but it's not exactly.
And they drew Michael Cera.
Yeah, it's all these little cute little, just like the original comics sort of had that like anime look, with the big eyes. And there's lots of like, action, lots of fighting.
Sweet.
Edgar Wright holds up. He's Shaun of the Dead, right? And then Hot Fuzz. I showed my son and his buddies. I'm like, you guys want to see a really smart, fun movie? Because they were watching all these scary movies. And I showed them Shaun of the Dead. I hadn't seen it probably since it came out. And they loved it. These 12-year-old boys were howling over the absurdity of zombies taking over a London pub. That was his first one, I think. And then...
Yeah, well, he had a movie before that, but that was his first big movie. And the one before that, it doesn't show up anywhere, but I think he's a little embarrassed by it, but it's called Fistful of Fingers.
Oh, right.
And
I remember.
I've yet to see it. I'd like to be a completist with him, because I've loved everything he's done, and he doesn't move at a super fast pace. He doesn't have movies coming out constantly, because like he likes to come on Doug Loves Movies when he's got a new movie promote. But in the 13 years I've known him, he's only been on 8 times, because he doesn't want to come on just to come on, which is like, right. Okay, I guess that's everybody has to have their their limits or whatever. But he enjoys coming on and playing the games, and he's really good at them. The last time he was on, he just destroyed everybody. Like, he just had all the right answers.
Amazing.
Yeah, but all of his movies I like very much, and most of them are streaming somewhere. I'll vouch for all of them. And but Scott Pilgrim is my favorite of his films.
Nice.
And so check out Scott Pilgrim Takes Off.
Yeah, that was fun, man. We appreciate it. Do you want to promote
problem.
anything? You want to promote anything? Any stand-up or anything?
Oh, if you go to DougLovesMovies.com, that's where all my road dates are, and I'm doing not only Doug Loves Movies tapings out in the wild, but also I have an ongoing series of shows called the Benson Movie Interruption, where me and my guests just sit in the front row of a movie with microphones and just riff comments throughout the film. And so I got one of those coming up in November 26th at the Gramercy in New York City. But all the dates are at DougLovesMovies.com.
Thanks, buddy. We really appreciate it.
Mustache Tales.